Welcome to the Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ 102.1, where we challenge the assumptions of our current society to resist oppression and investigate alternative ways of living, for a world based on justice, solidarity and sustainability. Welcome to the Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ 102.1 FM, your local community radio station. My name is Andy, broadcasting from the Jagera and Turrbal lands here in Brisbane, and I will be hanging out with you for the next hour on your radio. Today on the show, I'm very excited. It's a very exciting topic. We're going to be talking about marriage, and we're going to be talking about marriage because I have a significant life event coming up in the next 24 hours. I'm getting married, and another exciting thing here in the studio with me is my fiancee, soon-to-be wife, Beck. How you going, Beck?
I'm good. Hi, everyone.
Very nice. If you're a regular listener to the Paradigm Shift, you probably hear my voice very often and maybe hear a bit about my political beliefs, but not much about my personal life. But it's great to have you here, Beck, on the Paradigm Shift. You have been on before. I've interviewed you about your work in Kurdistan. Yeah.
And I was on years before that as well.
Oh, yes, you've been in the studio talking about anti-war activism or some... Yeah,
quite a few years ago now.
Some long-term Paradigm Shift listeners might remember that one. I have known Beck for a long time and presumably will for a long time into the future. We're going to make our vows, but the Paradigm Shift, we're not just going to talk about me and Beck and how we got to know each other and all that today. As ever, it'll be, I guess, casting a critical eye on our society and all that entails, and so we will have a few interviews today on the show. I spoke with Alicia Webb, who is married now, for a long time wasn't allowed to be. She is in a same-sex union. So we talked about what marriage means for her and the changing of laws around marriage. I spoke with Larysa about a feminist critique of marriage, of which there are many. We got to hear Larysa's, and I also spoke about something which is sadly too common in the marriages in our society, which is intimate partner violence. I spoke about that with Annika Simons. And so we'll hear all that. But first off, we'll hear from myself and Beck about why we decided that marriage is something worth doing. Beck, do you want to start us off? What does marriage mean to you?
Well, very excited to be getting married. But for me, it means gathering your friends and family around you and in front of them, and as a Christian in front of God, saying this is the person I love and I want to spend the rest of my life with them, and I'm committing to doing that, and working through difficulties and relying on your support community that are here witnessing to do that as well.
Yeah, I think we have an idea, I guess, of like a very individualistic idea of what things mean, and I guess what things mean to a person. But a marriage, it's a public statement, and I guess it's engaging in a long tradition as well, isn't it? A long tradition in our culture and in many others, and as you said, like a kind of a tradition that involves I guess a spiritual kind of ritual and a spiritual belief as well.
Yeah, as a Christian, it's quite meaningful for me to make that promise in front of God and feel the blessing of a spiritual blessing on the union too.
It's interesting that I'm an anarchist as well. I'm a Christian, but like my beliefs about Jesus and his kind of beliefs about institutions have meant I'm a bit suspicious of institutions in general, and so that leads into a critique of the church and of marriage and often the way it's done, and we'll hear some other critiques. But I think one of the things that I definitely believe in is love, and it's like, I guess the idea that these things, love, commitment, self-sacrifice, teamwork, that these things are so significant, and that marriage is sort of like a public statement of these things, these beliefs that this is the best way to live. And I think a long union, a long committed relationship is such a good model for life, and that's in a lot of way why we have it, is because we're not meant to live life as random individuals or as a group of individuals in a mass impersonal society. We need to love somebody. We need somebody that loves us to live our full life and live the best that we can. So I'm excited to be getting married. We are talking about marriage on the Paradigm Shift. It's a bit of a celebration of love and marriage, and I spoke to a few different people to get a few different perspectives on marriage. And to start off with, I spoke with Alicia Webb about her experiences as somebody in a same-sex marriage. Let's have a listen to Alicia.
Hi, I'm Alicia. I'm married and I live in Melbourne.
So we're talking about the marriage on the Paradigm Shift today, and of course for a long time in our culture and laws, marriage meant between people of opposite genders. As of the last few years, it doesn't necessarily mean that, and you are one of those people who has been married since then to somebody of the same sex.
Yeah, that's right. I got married in December 2019.
I'm interested in hearing from perspective of somebody in a same-sex marriage. I guess, what does marriage mean for you? What does the ceremony and the title mean to you?
That's a really interesting question. I think for my partner and I, it was about legitimacy and equality. So obviously I'd been attending a lot of weddings since I was in my mid-20s of my friends and family, and I guess it doesn't feel very good to be locked out of that institution, and also the social ceremony of standing in front of your parents and your loved ones and saying we're committing to each other was something we just felt like we wanted to be a part of. And it was weird growing up thinking that we couldn't be a part of it, although of course we had gay friends who just did the ceremony anyway for the social aspects of it. But when the law changed, we thought, it's time, let's do it.
Did it change your relationship, first off being able to be married and then actually marrying?
I don't think so. We were pretty committed and living, a lifestyle of a committed couple anyway. And I don't think it's changed how we interact or, live together. But I don't know about that one. I don't know if it's changed anything. We wanted to do it, and I suppose hoped that it cements our legitimacy as a couple in the eyes of our community, I suppose.
I guess there was a lot of push for gay marriage as a measure of equality, equal rights for people regardless of sexuality. But then some people would say that marriage in itself is like a patriarchal and heteronormative institution that, society should be moving forward from. Did that play into your decision about whether you wanted to be married or not, or whether you thought same-sex marriage should be available or not?
It's a really interesting question. First and foremost, I do believe in equality. So if you think that marriage is a stupid institution or a good institution, you should be able to participate or not participate, no matter which adults you choose to marry. So I don't think the patriarchal origins of marriage should affect the argument for equality. But when it comes to my individual choice to get married, I've often said that, as a sort of a feminist and a person who considers myself modern, if I was straight, I probably wouldn't have got married. But for gay people, and particularly lesbians, where there's no patriarchy involved whatsoever, it feels more like a progressive act. But I understand that the institution itself has origins in the transfer of human property.
Yeah, I guess the part of the push for marriage equality, there was this idea that love is love, equality, which is a nice catchphrase, but actually, love can mean lots of things, and the word can be used to describe lots of things, not all of which are healthy in our society, as we see frequently. I think, are there things about the marriage tradition and ritual that you see as really powerful, and that extending that out to other people helps grow our society?
Yeah. Look, I think there's positives and negatives, and I guess we can all try and pick out the positives. We don't have to do all the parts of any ceremony that's rooted in religion or culture. And for my partner and I, we just chose the bits of a wedding ceremony and a marriage that suit us and seem positive and centred firmly on love and commitment, and went with those. So, choosing words that are respectful of individual freedom, but also around commitment, rather than some of the old, the awful old obey terms and things like that.
In some ways, the marriage equality campaign was an interesting, rallying of support behind the institution of marriage, which otherwise marriage rates, are declining, divorce rates are going up, more people are staying single. I guess for the general world, do you think that same-sex equality marriage was something that, contributes to our society of love, our society's understanding of love?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think gay people are already living in domestic committed couples, and to not afford this institution that is generally still held to be an important part of our social fabric, to not extend it to gay people just seemed, unjust. And I still think it's everyone's choice to decide if marriage has a place in their life, but it's good for everybody to be able to make that choice. All
right. Thanks very much, Alicia.
Thanks for having me.
That is Alicia Webb about same-sex marriage and what the ritual and institution of marriage means for people who have been traditionally denied it in our culture. And just what a great sentiment. I guess that's what it comes down to as political activists, that ultimately we believe that the love, the care for other people is the force that can overcome, I guess, the selfishness and greed in our society. Now, we are talking about marriage today on The Paradigm Shift. Here with Andy, I do have Beck with me, my soon-to-be wife, in the studio as well. But we're playing a few interviews of different views on marriage, of which there are many, and it's good to take in all those different views. And I spoke with a good friend of ours, Annika, who has had not the best experience of marriage, but certainly one where you learn a bit more. So let's have a listen to Annika.
My name's Annika. I'm a she/her person, and I'm a single mum of two.
So we're talking about marriage today on The Paradigm Shift, and you have been married, Annika, though your own experience probably wasn't the greatest, but it should be noted also that it's not that unusual in our society to have experiences of marriage that aren't the greatest. Can you tell us briefly about your experience of marriage?
So I got married in 2008 to a man who was essentially my first real boyfriend/partner. We dated for a year, and I was 25. And I was probably younger than many people, but not most people in some, scenarios. But I was very optimistic about love and positive about a long-term monogamous future with him. And, interestingly, in the background, I have several friends who were also married at about this age who are still married. So I didn't have any qualms, I guess, about that. Had a kid a year later and another one 18 months after that. And when I think about it, what I hadn't realised was that he was very dependent on substances. So he was drinking and overusing prescription dexamphetamine. And as the relationship kind of progressed, we had some big conversations about that. We'd also had therapy together. We'd also moved house. And he had stopped drinking when my oldest was born, but then started using amphetamines harder, probably to self-medicate an underlying mental health condition. Yeah, when I look back again, with my 2020 hindsight, there'd always been some power and control dynamic in the relationship. However, the phrase is when you have rose-coloured glasses on, the red flags look white. And so I didn't see necessarily those things as progressively worse or too much to worry about. I had a lot of trust that he would be able to work through that stuff and that the relationship could survive. But he became more unwell progressively, and the relationship kind of descended down the rabbit hole of intimate partner violence, in that the emotional abuse and mental manipulation kind of included name-calling and accusations of infidelity and denigration and blame, especially blame for his mental health. And then when some property started getting damaged, he insisted that I distance my family, and he told me that he'd kill me. I think that was I left in 2013. I had a 2 and a 3-year-old. So, that's my experience of marriage, while still feeling some optimism about marriage as an institution as well, that it could be a beautiful thing for some people, and that might be great.
Yes. Well, sadly, intimate partner violence is, far too common across the board. And I guess some people see marriage as an institution as something that enables that. But there's also, I guess, the cultural ideas around marriage as well about, that perfect day and the white dress or whatever, or, do you think that marriage itself plays into enabling or making worse domestic violence?
Oh, I think that's a really interesting, notion. So the idea that, we've created an institution that can lend itself to being manipulated and subverted. I think it still comes back to how we develop ourselves within that institution, any work relationship or friendship or anything like that. The idea that we're still whole people within ourselves without that marriage is something, I guess, that I feel a bit disappointed that isn't possibly emphasised as much as it could be. So therefore, I totally see there are situations where the idea of being married or the Cinderella complex or whatever it is can play into not speaking up for oneself or speaking over the other person or continuing unhealthy patterns of relationships. So I don't think it's causative. I think it's a very messy mix of what's going on culturally.
Do you feel like you were adequately prepared by, our culture and its marriage for what happened in the end?
I think in some ways in my family, there's a great belief in marriage. So culturally, like, I feel like I was prepared for perhaps a certain type of marriage. So I was prepared for one where people were mutually respectful, where people could say and be who they needed to say and be and what they needed to say and be. Yeah, like, so in my family, like, lots of people are happily married, or they're at least comfortably married, or they're kind of at least working hard together on having a functional or good relationship. Like, my personal ideals around marriage that I'd grown up with in my family were that marriage is great, but it might be hard sometimes, but it will be worth it. But the reality was that, like, the other person isn't thinking the same thing. They don't have that same ideal. And I guess I wasn't prepared for a difference of ideals around that. Yeah, like, when I look at it as well, like, there's a whole wedding industry that makes money off people getting married and the idea of being married and happily ever after. And I have always been very optimistic about marriage, and that may have been influenced by this Disney narrative or capitalist narrative of we do these beautiful things and we stay together forever. And at the same time, like, I would have always considered myself a feminist. So I would have considered myself impervious to that influence, but something still got through of that idea that marriage will be great and you stick at it and you work together and everything will be okay in the end.
Yeah. Well, what do you think could change about our society to make for healthier marriages and better prepared couples?
So there's a lot of things there. So I think, because I'm thinking marriage isn't for everyone, and being long-term monogamous isn't for everyone, and it's like a particular challenge, I guess, and choice of its own. So for people who do choose to be long-term monogamous, it's like a big thing, big event. And so I think for me personally, when I think about how I parent my children, I try to make sure that we talk about communication a lot in my little family of origin with my kids, that they know they can have a voice and that they can make choices in a relationship. We talk about relationships and boundaries and self-awareness and self-development and sex and therapy and all of this stuff. I guess my intention is to be open about relationships and all of the intricacies of that without shame. And I think shame played a big part in my recovery from intimate partner violence, being able to share that story without feeling that it was my fault or that I would be blamed or that it was a bad thing that I'd done, surviving intimate partner violence. Yeah, I think there's a lot of roles that could be taken up by, schools or professionals, or I grew up in a church, talking, I guess, more about values and friendships, like platonic friendships, and then partnering and marriage, that maybe could be done differently, and I think is now done increasingly more proactively to anything I grew up with. There's so many possibilities for strategies for helping kids and teenagers navigate those relationships going forward.
All right. Thanks very much, Annika.
That's all right. My pleasure.
We are talking about marriage and weddings today on the Paradigm Shift, and of course it is, this show exists to challenge the assumptions of our society, as we say in the intro. And so even though I'm excited to be getting married tomorrow, and very much looking forward to the rest of my life as a married man, I thought it was worth interrogating it a bit. And of course, over the years, some of the people that have done that the most have been feminists, critiquing the idea and the tradition of marriage. And so I called up my friend Larysa, who is critical of marriage, but here's an interesting little anecdote before we go into the interview. I was about to go ring shopping to get a wedding ring, as you do when you're preparing for a marriage. And I was actually on a picket line with Larysa. We were doing an anti-war protest at a weapons manufacturer office in UQ, and I told her that was my afternoon activity, and she said, "Oh, I've got a couple of wedding rings you could have." My parents' wedding rings, and she said, "Well, I'm not a big fan of marriage, but I'm a big fan of myself and Beck getting married." And so she gave us the rings, and great to be using them. Beck, I'll be putting one of those rings on your finger tomorrow.
Yeah, it was really lovely. It was so funny, Andy coming home with this story from Larysa about a couple of wedding rings she was just willing to give away.
Of course, it's not the ring, the little bit of gold is not the important thing, and it's certainly not what will keep you together as a couple, but as a symbol. It's a part of our culture going back quite a long way. So anyway, I thought, well, Larysa, she's contributed to our wedding, even though she's said she doesn't believe in marriage. So I thought I'd call her up and chat to her about why. Let's have a listen.
So my name's Larysa, and I'm single. I've never been married, and I've never wanted to be married. And I just think that when women and girls are educated, the population is in much better control, because education is proportional to women being in control of their lives and therefore in control of their bodies.
So I guess there's a few different feminist critiques of marriage. They're all pretty linked. Like, one is that the male as the head of the household kind of control, it's a patriarchal institution, and that women have less independence, and like you say, that women, they raise kids rather than pursuing their own vocation in life. I guess what are the particular things that meant for you that you've never wanted to be married?
I never know exactly, which one's the most relevant, because there's so many reasons, but I think I always come back to whatever it is that I'm doing at the moment. At the moment, I'm drawing pictures about the story of my life, and a lot of the pictures are about conflict between my parents and I. And I think the reason that I always think of when people say, why don't I have any children, it's because I didn't want them to be raised the way that I was raised. And I couldn't really see how I could raise a child of my own without having this influence of my parents interfering with what I thought meant, a good life for a child, because I didn't have a happy childhood. And I didn't want to make that happen again. And I'd heard enough people say, I'm not going to raise children the way I was raised, and yet you still have children, and I see what you do to them, and I'm not doing that. So, yeah, that was the primary reason why I never wanted to have children. And then on the weekend, I met a woman who could have been me, like the story that she told me of her life. She ended up with an alcoholic partner of her children, and because she was so enmeshed with this life that, she thought she wanted for herself, she stayed with a man who was not very good for the children, and that was another reason why I didn't want that for any children in the world, was that I was never really sure that it would turn out the way that I wanted it to, as a happy child.
So there's no doubt in the world that as children we inherit the baggage from our parents and from our society. We have a society that in lots of ways is flawed, and that innocent children take on without any say in the matter. But yet, children are born, and our species kind of perpetuates by nature and by people's desire to do that. Do you think that there are good ways, or there are better ways than, say, our traditional nuclear family and idea of marriage?
There must be, because we are, such a strong force in the world. We've managed to keep it together for thousands of years. There's any number of places where there's more of a tribal society where children come and go into different houses, and they grow up with a sense of, I'm safe with whoever I'm with. I don't have to go home at 5 o'clock for dinner. They're capable of being resilient and relying on themselves with nature.
Yeah, I guess in terms of marriage, lots of cultures do have marriage traditions. The vast majority of cultures through history and through the world have had some kind of marriage tradition. And in lots of ways, our Western society, where people are marrying less than probably they have in history, we're also quite an individualistic and, in a lot of ways, a lonely society. Do you think that we need some other way to replace the commitment and the companionship and the connectedness of marriage?
Certainly. Is marriage important for child rearing, or is it that marriage is still about owning the children and owning the wife? So certainly it's not about the institution of marriage. It's about people's values. It's about, if I can treat a woman with respect, or even another man, or two women can treat each other with respect and see that they are equal to each other, then certainly a marriage can work. The institutions that we have, unless they are being disrupted and rebuilt and remade, they are all expiring. So marriage could work. It's just not working very well.
All right. Well, Larysa, are there any parting thoughts that you have on marriage and I guess a feminist view on it?
It's not necessary. It's just not necessary, and yet it's seen as some kind of more than what it really is. So I think that if somebody loves me, they don't need to marry me, and they don't need to buy me a ring, they don't need to buy me a house. If somebody loves me, I'll know. And, this is a new modern slant on marriage, that love is involved in marriage, because initially it was just a transaction and there was no love involved because the parents organised everything. And you already know how I feel about parents. So, my parting thought is just, it's not necessary, and I'm really surprised that people are still getting married in droves.
Well, that's right. I'll be joining the herd tomorrow. All right. Thanks very much, Larysa.
Thank you. You're welcome.
We're speaking with Larysa Fabok about marriage and why she's never done it, why she's never had kids, which is a bit negative, really. I'm up for the critiques. I think it's worthwhile. But also, I'm getting married tomorrow. So is Beck, who's in the studio with me here.
Hi, everyone.
And so before we go out, I think it's worth, again, talking about some of the valuable things about marriage, and also, as Beck was just mentioning, the fact that nobody has to do marriage a particular way, and there's lots of things in our society that are done badly or done well or could be done better, and there's lots of different ways you can do marriage. There's lots of different ways you can do wedding ceremonies.
Yeah. I was just thinking about, particularly a few people have mentioned the patriarchal aspect of marriage and things being changed in the wedding ceremony. I was questioning whether I've ever heard the honour and obey thing in a marriage ceremony, but whether it actually existed as part of it. But also lots of other parts of the marriage ceremony, like being walked down the aisle by your father. Both my parents are walking me down the aisle, but when they got married, neither of them was waiting at the end, and they both walked in from opposite sides of the church by themselves. So there's lots of things you can do like that changes the symbolism of the ceremony itself.
And certainly lots of different ways to do a marriage. Marriage at times have been problematic. There's been lots of good marriages through history too, but there are issues. But that's it. We can change things. We can do things better, and I guess that's the whole point of this show. Every week we come to talk about our society, and there's various issues about our society, but there's ways that we can improve it. And I think there's ways to do relationships well, relationships of all kinds, but the intimate relationships of which is a human need, not only for raising kids but also for to be a whole human, to be loved and to be able to love somebody else is like a fundamental part of being alive. And there's ways we can learn to do it better, to communicate better, to reflect on ourselves better, to listen better, to better show love, learn different ways about relationships and how they work. And that's, I guess, one of the fundamental things about it is that the same as anything, you want to run a radio station, you've got to always be learning how to do it better, working on it. You want to change the world. Like we shouldn't just accept the world as we've been given. We've got to try to make it better in a relationship as well. We've got to put work in and to learn how to do it better, and to believe that it's possible to not just live the world you're inherited in, or live marriage as somebody's idea of it, but that we can do things well. We can do things to the best of our ability, use the gifts that we have and share it with another person to meet that person's needs.
Yeah, I think it was one of the really nice things about writing our wedding vows together is thinking about what is it that we're promising each other and what do we want our marriage to look like.
Yes, and it's top secret. The reveal is tomorrow what the vows are. But, we can mention some of the things that as well as the traditional vows, which are quite beautiful and quite nice. That's the thing. There's lots of critiques about marriage. I think our society would be much worse without some of the ideas of love and companionship that we have, And the traditional vows, I think, are quite beautiful in lots of ways. But we wanted to add things like acknowledging when we've done something wrong and forgiving the other person when they've done wrong, to listen to the other person and to love in a way that it's not just about one couple shut off from the world, but that our love would overflow to affect the people around us and the world in general.
Yeah.
They're nice things. And so, even having considered all the options, having listened to the critiques of marriage, I think...
you're not put off, you're still coming tomorrow?
Yeah, that's right. I still will be turning up tomorrow, and still believing that, the best way to live is a way that best enables you to love. Not just a way that best enables you to live the way that you want to, even though we're all selfish in a way, and the marriage is one of the things that can teach us how selfish we are. But to live in a way that best enables us to love and to give and to be the person that we are and to be sharing with the world. And I think marriage gives you the opportunity every day to show love, to work on yourself, to have somebody else to share life's joys and struggles with, and that's a really powerful thing. And I think it would be sad for our society to lose that, and in some ways it seems like it is, that some of the sacredness in all kinds of ways is being taken out of our society, but some of the idea of love and relationships as being this a sacred thing, to lose that, I think would be a real shame. So that's why we'll be getting married tomorrow. It's been great talking about it on the Paradigm Shift today, and I'll be back next week with another show, although I will be away on my honeymoon and not in this 4ZZZ studio next Friday.
Bye, everyone.